welcome back, Raw Thoughts podcast listeners. Want to thank you once again for coming and listening another week, another episode, and it's all because of you guys. I have one request. I would love you guys to go to Apple Podcast and write a review. This helps with just the outreach, the support, and who doesn't love a 5-star podcast? You're listening to it. Anyways, today I have a local trauma therapist. Many of my episodes, we have talked with people about what their journey looks like within mental health. Suicide has came up many times, but now we're kind of on the other side of it. I have, like I said, a trauma therapist. He's done quite a lot of different things, so I'm not going to jump into that just right yet. But I want to introduce Mo. Thank you for coming on.
Absolutely. It's the first time that I'm on this end.
Yeah.
So it's interesting to be on the spotlight. Not sure how the dynamics shift, but so for some reason it does. Like now I'm like,
yeah.
The energy.
So
this
listeners,
way.
Mo actually has his own podcast as well.
Yes.
And so how is it being on the other side?
It's different, which actually helps because now I can be a little bit more sympathetic, more empathetic, I guess, to the people I invite to our podcast. Because I always feel, now that we've been doing it for a while, it's just kind of like, okay, for us, it's normal. But people have been asking for me to say my story, and for some reason, it hasn't worked out, the timing. So I'm not sure what's going to come out of this, but I'm excited.
Yeah.
And I reached out to you, and I was like, I got to reach out to somebody there. Not to actually be on the spotlight by all means, but just to connect with somebody. And then this came about, so worked out perfectly.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm, like you said, you haven't told your story, and here's a platform for you to tell your story, whatever that is. And I'm excited to see. So who is Mo?
Who is Mo? Oh my goodness, I don't even know where to start. I did change my name when I came to Idaho. When I was younger, I would go by my first name, which is Ephraim. But people will always butcher it. They would say Ephraim or Ephraim. And I got pretty tired of it. So when I went to high school, I went by Junior. I don't know why I went by Junior, but I went by Junior. And then it went through college. And then I decided to kind of shift things around in my life, leave the party Junior to the side, kind of like the college kid. And I went for Moises originally, which is my grandfather's name, who I have always had this weird connection with him. I met him when I was very, very young, but I never really got to experience that much time with him. So I was like, sounds good, has a good energy. And then before you know it, people were butchering Moises as well. They were saying Moses. So then Mo, and you can't not butcher Mo. So that's how Mo came about.
So did you legally change it, or is that
No,
just
it's just like a nickname. Yeah, it's Mo for short for Moises. And it served me well. I think it's done what it's supposed to do, and I'm thankful for my grandfather for that name. And here we are. I think when people tell me why a therapist, how'd you become a therapist? I always say life.
Yeah.
Life brought me here. I don't think I ever woke up one day and said, I want to be a therapist. I want to help people. Never that was my intention, not once. It never crossed my mind. So getting to a therapist, sometimes I don't even consider myself as a therapist. I consider myself just kind of, I guess, I guide people to the right place. But I'm from Mexico. I'm from Monterrey, Mexico. I went back and forth between Mexico and the U.S. every 4 years. So I can't speak 100% English or 100% Spanish. I'm like right in the middle of everything.
That's a perfect spot to be.
Absolutely. Except when you're trying to speak, when I go back to Spanish, I'm like, how do I say that? But I also count in Spanish. And people are like, what are you saying? I'm like, oh, because I was
that was so young.
So young, I learned to count in Spanish, and that stuck with me. And then people always ask me, what do you dream in, English or in Spanish? And I'm like, that's a great question. And I think I want to say English for some weird reason.
That is, I would have never asked that. I would have never thought that, I guess.
Yeah, which is interesting.
That is interesting.
But I can't put my thumb on it yet. I don't really know. Maybe
Do you dream?
I do.
Okay.
I do.
I was gonna say a lot of people don't dream.
Which tells me a lot about a person, right? As a trauma therapist, I'm always like, you don't dream. Well, most people
Why?
do. Most people do dream, but they can't remember. And a lot of people don't want to remember. And I'm like, why?
I never want to remember my dreams. I do. I remember my dreams sometimes where it can feel like it's reality. And I've had very, very, very vivid dreams since I was a child. And not even dreams, but it goes into nightmares. And
Yeah.
even as a child, I still recall these nightmares that I have, and it recurs. And so I wish sometimes that I could turn it off,
Yeah.
because last week there was, you wake up and you're sweating and
Yeah.
you're like, what is this? And your heart's racing and you remember bits and pieces of it. My other really big struggle is it's people, you know how sometimes it's like the spirit in your dream, or it's like a facade of who it should be. No, mine are like very detailed of who it is. I've had to call my mom before and be like, Mom, I've dreamt this. I need you to check in on grandma. I need this. I kind of had like a deja vu of my dad, and that happened. And so I do try to not remember them.
Wow, that's interesting. My mother's very good at that. So my mother periodically had these dreams about people dying or things happening in her life. And she was very in tune with them. And she actually started kind of developing this intuition. And she actually was spot on. And it's a gift. I always tell people, the healthier you are, the more you dream. And a lot of people don't want those dreams, but if you're having very raw dreams, it's because you're very healthy. Your brain's saying, look, like, you're healthy enough for me to show you this. Let's process this information so you don't have to.
Yeah.
But a lot of times we put the word nightmare. And what that does is it creates a bigger issue, because you're almost like torturing your brain, because your brain's saying, I'm confused. We're very healthy. I'm showing you something because we're healthy, but now you're almost like smacking me and say, like, shut up.
But what if those dreams are doing more distress to you by remembering them, by seeing them, versus a happy dream, or, kind of not as negative as a thing happening? I mean, what is that?
Yeah,
I mean,
and there's a couple of dreams, right? There's some dreams that I jump too high, and then falling just feels awful, right? To me, that is a nightmare. If I dream something that happened, like PTSD or something dramatic that happened to me, if I've processed that to a good extent, you have to process it somatically, which means a lot of the trauma happens in your body and it carries. That's why you're sweating. That's why sometimes you're doing things with your hands, or your hands like hurt because they're so like tight.
Yeah.
It's a lot of somatic trauma that's happening within the body. So you have to attack it from different ways, right? You have to process. You have to do a lot of somatic EMDR. You have to do so many things to get it out. If you don't, then it just continues to get worse and worse and worse. So when people say, well, yes, it is doing more damage than not to have those. So A, you go and get really good medication, the good stuff. B, you ignore it, and then, randomly they show up.
Yeah.
Or C, you actually find a way to process that information, because once it's out, it'll leave. You might have another dream, but it won't be as intense anymore, to where now your brain's perhaps showing you something else within what happened that you need to process. So I think it's a combination of things. Not all dreams are true, right? And I think that's kind of where you have to have a little bit of insight, intuition into yourself, and say, well, yes, this dream, it's a little bit dramatic and has nothing to do with me, and just put it aside. But sometimes you just have to write it out, because you'll forget. Sometimes I wake up and I'm like, this is so good. Like, I'll think about something like a great idea, and then I'll fall asleep and wake up and be like, I know I had a great idea. So
Write it down.
yeah, so sometimes you just have to write it down, have a little pencil pen to write it down. If you transfer the energy of the dream to a paper, that a lot of the energy goes onto the paper.
Mm-hmm.
So then what happens is you just kind of let it out of your body onto something else.
You're releasing it in
Yes,
some way.
somehow, in a very healthy way, right? Oh my gosh, this dream was about X, Y, and Z. You don't want to write an I person. When I tell people, I'm like, journal, but don't not journal like with, I had a terrible day today, because you're bringing a lot of the trauma versus writing in third person. So if you write it in third person, what happens is you're able to kind of distance yourself from the event, and then you're literally getting everything out.
Right.
So, hey Mo, today the podcast went awful, right? Like, you made Mackenzie so mad, right? She won't put
Hey,
it back.
don't manifest that.
You're right. No, hypothetically, right?
I
So
know, I'm just kidding.
and just writing that in third person. And what happens is you become your biggest cheerleader, and you're able to actually see this story objectively versus subjective, and you allow yourself to distance yourself and regulate yourself at the same time. So it's a great thing to do. I always have patients do it over 4 weeks. So I say, let's journal for 4 weeks. Journal just a short version of your day, what you struggle with in third person. Here's a trick. You cannot read that page until those 30 days are over.
Wow.
And the people that do this, I do it with a lot of people who suffer from low self-esteem, because a lot of people will tell you, hey, Mackenzie, you look great. And you're like, yeah, I know. It makes you uncomfortable. Or like, yeah, but that's not how I feel. And it's almost like in society today, when people give you compliments, we reject them.
Yeah.
We want to feel that way. So, and it's because it needs to come from within. It needs to come from us. So when you do the 30-day, I would call it 30-day challenge, whatever, you're able to see the growth from your own experience. And then you're like, oh my gosh, I wrote that? I can't believe I wrote that. I can't believe I was like, that event was so insignificant. I thought I wasn't going to pass my test a week. And it's been 3 weeks. And now I can't even think about the issue.
It really shows the growth of you where, same thing with, I'm going to give it an example of like weight loss, right? We don't see the weight loss. But when somebody else says, oh, wow, I've really been noticing that, I've really noticed, because it takes that time for them to do it.
Right.
And we're with ourselves 24/7 nonstop. And we don't see the growth in ourselves sometimes because we're just doing. And it's that time of reflection where you can sit down and say like, oh, wow, I have grown. Oh, wow, I can't believe I used to think like this.
I know. And it's the craziest thing. I've done that in journals, and I've done it in videos, because a lot of people are like, I don't have a journal. I'm like, well, do you have a phone? And they're like, yes, I have a phone. I was like, so make a 10-second video of your day in third person, because you don't have to look at yourself. You can just, it's like a voice or something. And it's crazy, because what you start understanding is, man, do I really speak that way? Like, am I really that negative? Like, are those the things that I'm actually showing? Because I thought I did great. And then you look back and you're like, it almost show you a representation of, hey, I'm growing, but oh my gosh, like there's always room for growth.
Right.
And I've done that a couple times, specifically when I struggle the most. When I went through a separation, that's when I understood that I needed to do something for myself, because I wasn't seeing anything move in my life. Because go for it.
I was going to just ask really quickly, were you a therapist when you went through the separation or not?
I was.
Okay.
I was when people say how long you been a therapist, I always say all my life. Sweat equity, I say, because everything has prepared me to be able to think, to process, to speak in a way that gets to that audience. And it comes not from school, believe me. I failed out of school. I think my GPA was 1.8 out of high school. I graduated with a 2.0 out of college. And it wasn't until I was diagnosed with ADHD, 27 or 28, around there, 26, yeah. And I graduated with a 3.9.
Wow.
So going back to the separation, yeah, it was 6 months of hard work with myself, allowing myself, giving myself permission to cry, giving myself permission to feel what I've always asked other people to do. Because it's always somewhat easy to be like, hey, like you're gonna be okay and you're the therapist. But just like right now, like you're having me on your podcast, I was able to just say, you know what? Here's my permission to actually understand what it means to go through a separation, the loss of something that we had, and just be raw with myself. And if I could go back again and do that, man, I'd do it again because I learned so much from it. My growth came from that. But in the midst of it, I would wake up every day and I can still remember saying, when is this like gut, the pit, when is that feeling going to go away? And I just said that for like months and months and months. And if you ask me what day it was that I stopped saying that, I couldn't remember. Like it's part of the growth.
Right. Right. How do you keep yourself as a therapist, hearing the things that you hear, seeing the things that you see, okay?
I don't think they're okay, right? Because I think there's a lot of stuff that we shouldn't hear. One of my biggest thing is that I don't know if this is the way I believe therapy is, and I tell this to my patients. I was like, I don't think I'm here to hear everything about you. I think as a therapist, there's this thing where people believe you're going to go into a room and say, let me tell you my story. That's not therapy. You can call your cousin, you can call your best friend to do that. So I would say 99.9 stop people from telling me their story and say, before we get into it, let's learn about the brain. Let's learn about trauma. Let's see if you understand what anxiety is, the difference between anxiety and stress, the difference between emotions and a feeling. Let's start by psychoeducating you as a person, because if I do that, I help you become self-sufficient, just autonomous, to where the goal is for you not to have a therapist all the time. It's good to have a therapist, right? Once in a while to go in there and just kind of like a oil change kind of thing.
Right.
But if you're going to counseling over and over and over and over and over, man, something's up.
You're not getting the tools that you need
Correct.
to be able to do it.
And that's my belief, right?
Right.
It's different for everybody. But ultimately, what helps me is educating the human being, the brain, to where every time they're going to ask me something, it's no longer this is what happened to me versus this is my issue. I'm struggling processing this small event versus your whole story. It's impossible to process your whole story. So why would I allow you to tell me your whole story?
Right.
So I don't like hearing you're present, because that doesn't tell me. It tells me a lot, but I'm a trauma therapist, so I go to the root of the event. And where I start is just your core belief as a human being. Everybody has it, right? It's I am worthless. I'm not lovable. I am alone. I am broken. And then people tell me that based on how they speak automatically. I don't have to ask them. They tell me this based on, I just feel like I can't get that. How would I say? A lot of people tell me I feel as though I can't do anything right. And when they tell me that, the brain is very predictable. So if you can't do that thing right, what would that say about you? Perhaps that you are dumb, perhaps you're stupid or something like that, hypothetically. And I already know where to focus my energy. And from there on, I said, okay, now let's go back to 0 to 7 years of age. And I love spending time 0 to 7 years of age. That's where all the work goes into for me as a therapist, because we're all subconscious.
Right.
You don't have a conscious. That's why little tiny humans believe in Santa Claus. That's why I can tell my kids, hey, look, I have a tattoo right here of my kids. It's a bear, but 2 cups. And I tell them, if anybody hurts you, I will become a bear. And I show up at their school, and all the kids always ask me, "All right, let's see it. Let's see it." Charlie said you can turn into a bear, and I'm like, I know, but it's only in very specific times. And they believe that because they're subconscious. So most of the things that we struggle with are rooted in 0 to 7. Anything outside of that comes a lot from those earlier age that people have ingrained as you're dumb, you're stupid, you're not wanted. Indirectly, a lot of times it happens indirectly. So when people tell me, "Oh, I have great parents," I'm like, yes, let's talk about that. Because a lot of the stuff that we do as parents, we don't notice because kids see it as subconscious behavior. We're conscious. So I can tell my kid, "Yeah, I love you." But what they're seeing is, yeah, like, but what? Like, that's, you don't want me. So if things don't match, then that's when I go in and say, let's find out why you feel like you're not wanted.
Mm-hmm.
And tell me the first event that you recall feeling like you're not wanted. And then from there, that's where the transformation begins.
Right.
Because then we can identify the event that made him believe that.
Yeah. What about events that happen outside of that age? I mean, there's a lot of events that, that's, I would say, specific to childhood trauma, but there's also trauma that, first responder. We had this, meeting where we're continuing to see that trauma within something. We're continuing to be around an environment where trauma happens. Not only are the first responders seeing that, but whoever was in that, situation, they also could have experienced that. And it didn't come from ages 0 to 7.
Correct.
So like how do you help with that?
Yeah. And so it's like a couple of things, right? So a lot of times when I've done counseling, that first responder stops being a first responder, which is crazy. And I warn them, I'm like, sometimes when you actually process your core belief, it leads you to see that, man, I got into this event or this field for the wrong reason. I actually wanted to be a chef because they no longer feel like they have to help. So when they go into it and they're exposed to certain trauma, their lens is going to be a little bit off because they feel as though they could have helped more, hypothetically, right? Because that's kind of why they went into this field. And if they didn't help, then it becomes even more traumatized. A lot of first responders don't seek help, so they're very good at bottling things. Talk therapy does actually more damage than not, because what you're asking them to say is, tell me about, this event at 3:00 in the morning. Right? And a lot of them do say that, and they're saying it, and what happens is it feels good because they're releasing a lot of that negative energy, but they're producing more. And generally gets worse and worse and worse and worse. So the energy they produce, now it's actually charged times 2. And then they tell somebody else, and then it's charged times 3. And then it comes a point where they just bottled. So my buddy Steven Ammon, he works with first responders. When something bad happens with first responders, the best time to do EMDR is there, like within hours. Faces of Hope here in Idaho, in Boise, they do crisis counseling, and I always the thing that I dislike the most is when people say, "Oh, I'm not ready for EMDR because it just happened." Well, that's actually the best time to do it, because if somebody is flooded, you can't hurt them more than that. Like, they're there already, so actually you can release a lot of that. So the best time to actually go in there and do it is immediately after it. So the
That's
trauma,
just not realistic.
but people don't think that way because
it's not realistic.
Yeah,
you got to go to the next call. You got something else going. You don't have enough people to. I mean, that's just not. That's just me speaking. That's also just not realistic.
Yeah, I hear you. And Boise, we're like at the bottom for mental health.
Yes,
which makes it even more unrealistic, because we're in demand for everything. I feel like social workers, therapists, nursing, like everybody feels like it's
everybody.
There's not enough people.
We are actually the number 2 in the U.S. currently for like the most jobs. Like our economy is doing well here because we do have a lot of demand for people. I mean, everywhere you look, people are hiring.
Yeah. Yeah.
everywhere.
So it's like you say, how do you deal with the trauma? How does that affect? Well, I think if you don't understand who you are as a person and why are you doing things, it's gonna be even times. It's just so much harder. So the way you respond is you learn to just kind of
Yeah.
bottle, right? And that's why, first responders need more resources. They need additional help. The stigma of counseling. I wish we can change the name to something else, because I feel like the word counseling, kids hate it, right? In my country, if I went to go get meds, you're crazy. He's crazy.
Yeah.
Right? So I don't think I was diagnosed. I don't think I was taken to anywhere, because in my country, like, it just, no. And life was 3 times harder.
Mm-hmm.
I had so much trauma because I didn't get medicated. And a simple pill kind of cleared that mind. If I didn't take that route, perhaps there's other street drugs that kind of have the same effect initially. And a lot of what happens is it's a self-medicating, right? Like, I'm not saying meth, but a lot of people who can't get the correct services, meth actually works for their brain. That's why they're able to produce. They're like cleaning, and they feel good about it. So
Right.
unfortunately, it's the kind of bad one, and they're led to believe that they're addicts. So it's this system, this mental health system that it's just not working. And I'm glad I can able to say that. I can say that
Yeah.
here,
Yeah.
that what we have going on, it's not working.
Right. So how do we change it?
Man, it's I think everybody can always ask that question, and it comes from educating. It comes from getting to know people that really want to do the change. That I don't have the skills to be a politician, hypothetically go to Senate and do it. I don't. But what I do have is the ability to connect with others. Connecting with others ultimately leads to that change. And if I were to say, yeah, that can't happen, then it won't happen. But if I have the intuition to reach out to you and say, hey, listen, I'm passionate about talking about this. How can we connect with somebody from here that can help us change the mental health system? Because we're doing the minimum.
Right.
And if we make changes, it's not for the best. It's for the convenience of the system of itself. How do we save money versus how do we actually put services into place to perhaps the first 5 years? Yes, the first 5 years suck, but after that, it just takes off.
Right.
But I feel like we're not willing to. When I moved to Idaho, everything was very small thinking mentality, and I think there's a good aspect to that, because we're changing that. But with that comes close-minded people. And when I go into places, and I'm going to say this, and a lot of people might get mad, and you might get a lot of feedback from this, but the disease model that we have doesn't work. There's only a 6% rate of success.
What do you mean by the disease rate?
So if somebody goes into Intermountain or goes to Conwood or goes to a lot of these funded, like Medicaid funded places, they're expected to abide by this disease model, the medical model, and the AAs, and that if your father was an alcoholic, then you're going to be an alcoholic. Well, that's not how science works. Like, it's just impossible for that to happen. There's only 7 diseases in this world that get passed on genetically. But what's happening is we're telling people, hey, your dad was an alcoholic, so by default, you will be an alcoholic. If you tell this to a 7-year-old, this 7-year-old believes that he's an alcoholic, and therefore he will become an alcoholic because that's kind of what he's been wired to believe. Going outside of that is uncomfortable. It's just the unknown. So it's tough because I work in that field, and if I go outside of that, oh my gosh, I get kicked out of the units or I get fired. But the reality is, I tell people, like, you have a 6% chance of staying sober for the next 3 months post discharge. And they're like, what? And I'm like, yes. I don't tell them this because I'm saying the disease model sucks. No, I'm saying because I want you to know that you must be part of that 6% to make it. But if we don't tell that individual you have a 6% chance of making it, naturally you're led to believe maybe it's 50-50, maybe 40-60, and therefore they might not work as hard as someone who is of the information that is 6%. I'm going to be that 6%. It's extremely hard to make it today. If you're an addict, you're set for failure.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of reasons, behind addiction, within there. But you don't think it's anything? I mean, you don't think any addictive tendencies can run in the family?
So the way the disease gets created, it evolves. So you do the disease, it actually, the more you believe it over a period of time, you actually create the disease genetically. It takes like 12 atoms or whatever to actually make a disease. But you're not naturally born with those 12 initially, just bam, right? So there are things such as if my father was stressed after work, came home and said, oh my gosh, it was such a long day at work. Can you go get me a beer? That behavior over time tells my son that every time that I'm stressed, well, stress is, cured by the alcohol. So then we start having these subconscious behaviors that our kids are just picking up without them knowing. And by the time they're 12, if they pick up a drink, wow, this actually might actually help. So then they're almost like we're teaching them how to almost become versus preventing it.
Mm-hmm.
I'm big on, look, let's address why you became an alcoholic. Let's talk about when you started drinking. Let's talk about why alcohol has become your coping skill. Because a lot of people try to complete suicide because they go off the alcohol or they go off their drug of choice. Mm-hmm. Because that is their coping skill. So obviously, this has a lot of significance in their lives. To take that away from them, it becomes tricky. You have to replace something negative with something positive. You don't know anything because the last 30 years, all you've known it's this huge thing that is actually good for you subjectively. We're in the society saying, no, this is awful. You're an alcoholic, and it's shame and guilt. And if you have one little drink, people just get mad at you, and family gets mad at you, right? Because the understanding of the expectation of an alcoholic is don't mess up. But if you believe in the disease model, it comes with it, almost. Like there is almost that risk of. So I say use the disease model as a foundation, perhaps, and continue building to what works for you. But don't expect this to hold you and make you like the person that you wish you want to be, because it's going to hold your power. Because you're literally it's just holding it to you, right? Like, I can't go downtown. Why? Because there's I can't go to Albertsons, the new one, because there's just too much alcohol in the middle of everything, right? So it starts becoming, it holds too much power over you. I want people to be free. I want them to just be free and be able to live without having to hyper focus on alcohol. I want you to hyper focus on your kids. That's on your family. But the other ways, sometimes you're just staring at the alcohol. And I don't know, I feel like there should be better ways. East Coast, they're very progressive. They're doing things a lot different than we are.
In what ways?
Thinking outside the box, open-minded. They're trauma-informed. It took the VA years to allow EMDR to be part of their trauma treatment. I think that maybe last 7-10 years they picked it up. It took years for them to accept it. And now we're doing it, but we're doing it wrong, hypothetically. But we have to think outside the box. I love to teach people how to think outside the box. If you've been doing something for 10 years and you're failing, we got to do something different.
Right. Is there an example of maybe what they're doing, thinking outside the box in the East Coast?
Well, first of all, they're using a lot of EMDR. Like hospitals are integrating EMDR into their hospitals. Over here right now, it's kind of frowned upon. Like now we're using trauma informed, like informed, and you're not certified. You just have to watch a video and you're trauma informed. And it's a way of it opened the door for something, but the foundation of things is CBT, cognitive behavior therapy, which tries to address the initial, the kind of the outside layer of a problem. Like it's just that's where it starts. But if it's too big, if alcohol is too big, then you just remain on the outside. You never actually get to the root, versus actually going into it, working from in to out, and going from there. To get treatment in Idaho, it's incredibly hard. Insurances such as Medicaid or Blue Cross. Blue Cross will say, yep, I'll pay for treatment. 6 months, sure, you got it. And then you get accepted, and they say, oh, by the way, we'll only pay 2 weeks at a time. And then you're left out with like $40,000.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, can't do that.
The pay for sure.
Right.
And I would definitely say the lack of resources. I mean, trying to look at counselors, therapists, psychiatric, even if you look at them online, not taking new patients, because they're overloaded.
Right.
The amount of people that are trying to reach out to them
Mhm.
can't get help because we don't have enough.
Yes. Like all the therapists that I send people to, they're like months out.
Yeah.
Months. So it's the demand. It's just, as a therapist, I don't want to be working 40 hours a day outpatient. I tell people, can you imagine being my 8th patient on Friday at 6:00?
You are burnt out at that
At
point.
a point, right? Like it's almost unethical
Yeah,
to provide that many hours of work.
absolutely.
You're just burned out. That's why I left outpatient, because I'm like, I just cannot do 8 hours in a room. It's the first 3 are great. The 4th, the 5th, the 6th. I get home. My kids don't get anything.
Mm-hmm.
So what's happening is, well, now very good therapists are saying, well, we're going to up our prices, which is good in theory, because now they can only see 20 patients. But now, no, if they're very good, those 20 patients don't go anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
So that therapist can only do so little
Right.
in the big picture,
Right.
versus creating a bigger hospital or a system that can provide more of a holistic approach to an issue. And it's not about money, right? It's not like, well, we cannot give trauma because your insurance won't pay for it.
Yeah. I mean, one of the biggest things that's you just said was I got burned out. I got enough. Like I got out of it.
Mm-hmm.
I had enough and I got out of it. And I think that response, you get so overworked. It's like having a sponge filled with water and you're still pouring water on it. It can only absorb so much until it's hit its threshold.
Right.
And that is the exact same way it is with your career, within mental health, within even people.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the demand on people of any job right now, I mean, and especially within, our world, I will always come back to my first responders. They've had enough.
Right.
And then that's when people get out. I mean, I'm sure for therapists too, social workers, the longevity of the career is 3 to 5 years.
Wow, I didn't know that, but
3 to 5 years within first responders, within social work, because that exact same quote that you said, like, I had enough.
Yeah.
You don't have the money. People that get into your career, you're not chasing the dollars.
Right.
You're chasing the support. You're chasing the love that you want to give to people, the helping hand you want to give to people. But then our systems take advantage of that.
Absolutely.
And then they say, oh, well, like, here's another patient for you. Oh, well, here's some more hours. If you get more hours, then you get more pay.
Right.
You get more money, but that takes away from your family.
Mm-hmm.
And then that takes away from your emotional, endeavors of going home and being present for your kids.
Yeah.
It's just this vicious cycle that is continuing to go, and trying to figure out how to stop that pinwheel, because it's not good.
Absolutely.
And right now we are on the trajectory, I mean, even the world, of just going downhill, all because of our mental health.
Right. And I think I mean, I remember when I was younger, and I tell people this, when I was younger, and there was no psychiatric hospitals for kids. Like, I mean, there was, but it was like, whoa.
It was a big,
like,
it was like
your kid had to be like almost schizophrenic
Yeah.
or extremely like suicidal. And the way they were treating patients back then was even as drastic as what they were, right? But they've reduced that. And now what we're seeing is, look, you asked me, what did you do? Sex, party, and alcohol, and rap music, and like that was back then what we would go to. Now society is like suicide and
cutting yourself and
right. So it's
passing out
shifted,
yep.
And it's created this huge business, right, for mental health, to the point where you don't know nowadays whether the therapist is doing it for the money, or they actually raw and they want to help. And the ones that are helping are starting to get burnt.
What factor do you think has shifted from years ago in adolescence and young folks to now?
Media. You know, and this
I was
is part.
hoping you were going to say that.
And this is part of media. And this is what I do. And if I can get anything out of this podcast and teach our viewers something, is the first 20 minutes of your day are the most important 20 minutes that you can spend on yourself. If you watch the news, if you listen to the radio, if you read articles on the newspaper, if you open Instagram or Facebook, you're going to have a bad day. Because media sells negativity. The Biggest Loser, I love watching that show. Throughout the show, they say the word change. Can this person change? Change is a negative thing to society now.
Mm-hmm.
And I love that in the last episode, when they want you to tune out, they say, check out their transformation. Subconsciously now we check out. You say the word change, I'm plugged. I want to see if they're going to fail. I love seeing, like it just, they know what sells and what doesn't.
Mm-hmm.
So the first 20 minutes, if you're going to listen to music, it better not have any words in it. And I would say, if it's music, it better have good energy. The frequency of that going to be low, because then you're going to get a little bit sad. So you have to be very, very in tune, very careful those first 20 minutes. That will predict how you respond to anything of the unknown coming your way.
Mm-hmm.
And if you wake up late, everything is going to go that way. If you wake up and somebody turns the lights on you, it depletes your dopamine. Like if you sleep with the TV on, or don't have natural light like a candle or whatever, it depletes your dopamine. That's the time for when the brain actually like reboots everything. If somebody wakes you up, it's almost like
it's like a shock.
Like a shock, and it depletes your dopamine. That's why you don't do that to kids. That's why you wake them up slowly. Otherwise, with the light turning on, boom, there goes, and that kid's gonna have a rough day. So the first 20 minutes are the most crucial ones that I try to implement. I run a group in the mornings at 8:30, and I use that group to ground people, to teach them actually what meditation is, what mindfulness is, because a lot of people think it's the same thing. I'm like, no, like they're not the same thing.
What is it?
Mindfulness is the ability to shut your brain down. You use meditation to do that. And we teach sometimes mindfulness as this thing. Oh, it's very easy to do. Let's do this, breathing exercise, and mindfulness. There it is. I'm like, no. Mindfulness. Think of an activity, perhaps cleaning, puzzles. Puzzles shut my mind. Like I can just shut my mind to where it closes. If I go golfing, so that's mindfulness. That's how your brain becomes mindfulness. So now that you have that idea, is how can you do an activity alone, perhaps, to get you to that state of mind. That's very, very hard.
Yeah.
But when you get to that point, that gives you the goal. That's the goal. Now that you see it, your brain can achieve it. But if I don't give you that example, you're like, well, what does that look like? How does that feel? You're expecting this like, ooh, this feeling, this nirvana feeling, and it's no. You just have to be able to shut the brain down. If I teach you how to do that, you reduce your chance of suicide like 90%. Because you're able to tune anything out at any given point.
Right.
Once you're in mindfulness, that's the time when you consciously connect the consciousness with the subconscious. That's when you pull consciously an issue from a subconscious level. You can't go into mindfulness with an issue, because if you do that, you hyperactivate that to where now the issue is 10 times bigger.
I was going to say, you put it underneath the microscope.
Yes. And we're not teaching that correctly. We're almost saying, okay, you're struggling with divorce. All right, let's bring in the divorce into it. And it just, it becomes 10 times worse. No.
Right.
Let's go. Mindfulness, shut the brain. Once you're there, go in and consciously grab it. And that way you protect yourself at all costs. So if somebody says, hey, you're just a loser, you're consciously attached to that, and you're like, thank you for reminding me. I'm working on it. If somebody breaks up with you and makes you feel unwanted, yep, I've been working on that. So you don't really hyperactivate because you're consciously attached to that part of yourself. But in society, we teach the opposite. Like, no, disconnect, and go the other way.
Mm-hmm.
And then when something reminds you of it, an unexpected event, then it just blows up.
Triggered.
Mm-hmm.
Triggered for sure.
Absolutely.
What are, I think we've talked a lot about, different things, obviously, today. One thing that I see is, unhealthy coping mechanisms versus healthy coping mechanisms, and how we are releasing. You talk about, that connection between the unconscious and conscious, and a lot of people do say, like, hey, go disconnect for a little bit. I think they are being mindful. They just don't know that's what they're actually doing.
Right.
It may be an activity of, watching TV, and they're just blanked out.
Yeah.
You can get there in many different ways. You can meditate in many different ways. But unhealthy coping mechanisms are so much easier and make us feel better for a short amount of time.
Oh, absolutely.
Versus a long amount of time.
Yes.
How are you teaching people healthy coping skills, getting the resources to them, getting them the tools that they need? And I think that is one of the biggest things that is I guess the gap.
Right.
The gap that is there in society is that we're not teaching people, go work out, go do these things, get outside, how great they can make you feel.
Yeah.
Versus going out and having a drink, going out and smoking, going out and, finding random people to have sex with, like all of these things that aren't doing good for you. How do we get those resources to more people, or how are you getting those resources and tools to more people on a healthy coping mechanism?
Yeah. And I think that's the problem, that we're trying to teach people versus educating people. I hated school because they were trying to teach me something. But when I want to get educated, I go towards something that I'm interested in, and I'm educating it. So if we have to change our perspective on words, I'm big on words.
Because they mean this teaching and education feels the
same
thing to
right?
me.
Yeah, absolutely. And then feelings and emotions, people are just like, oh yeah. And then anxiety and stress, they're the same thing. And I'm like, no, they're not. You have to understand that all feelings are necessary. So by default, they're good. We put our own subjective to these feelings, and we make them bad. But I'm like, shame, guilt, stress, all good. They serve a point.
Right.
They're needed. As a counselor, if I'm saying, let me teach you coping skills for stress, and I don't understand you as a human being, what I'm doing is I'm teaching you how not to be stressed and actually increasing your anxiety level because I'm not educating myself. You need stress. Stress actually prevents you from anxiety. Stress lives in the mind, anxiety lives in the body. But if I know you're struggling with anxiety and I'm teaching you how to not be stressed, I'm actually making things worse. So when we talk about coping skills, I hate coping skills. All my clients know that I hate coping skills because
Why?
another word for coping is dealing. I don't want to help you deal with your problem. I don't want to help you cope with your problem. No, 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 no. I want to help you eliminate the issue. Use coping skills at the very last. When you're like about to grab the bottle, when you're about to end it. I would say coping skills is like your spare tire. Imagine waking up every morning and putting your spare tire on. You won't do it. You just won't. You get tired of it because what's happening is, well, you don't need your coping skill today. Why are we using it today? Go have fun.
Yeah.
Oh, but I gotta go. I use my coping skill. No, 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 no. You gotta go have fun. So the difference between coping skills and internal resources. Internal resources are things that I've educated myself on that live in my body. That when I am stressed, I can automatically depend on me, on my body, to work on what's going on. Coping skills tend to generally be external things, a book, something, counting, cards. If you don't have that, and that's your number one, then it gets dangerous. I'm a big thing on internal. Let me make you self-sufficient. Let me make you a better human. If I make you a better human, you educate the next person.
Right. So give us an example of what or how you can educate your clients or the listeners on they are in a stressful situation. Sometimes we can't eliminate whatever the issue is.
Correct.
We can't, that's life. The variables that come in with stress, that's just not reality. What is something that you could educate them on, maybe quickly, of dealing with stress?
Absolutely. Stress is good. Stress is needed. If I get fired today, right, and I did the right thing, I'm going to get very, very stressed. Stress can only live in the body for 3 minutes. 3 minutes. That's it. In those 3 minutes, stress is going to tell you exactly what to do. Whether you do it or not, that's your fault. Meaning that stress is going to tell me, hey, Mo, go update your resume. Call your wife, call your girlfriend, call everybody. Maybe call your family, say, I'm going to need some assistance in the next month or two. I got fired for doing the right thing. This is going to be stressful. I'm doing what stress is telling me to do. You do that, you eliminate anxiety by default because you're going towards a solution. But what happens is, oh my gosh, I got stress. Let's go get a beer. Stress is, then it's gone. So you've eliminated the one internal resource that can help you fix the issue or go towards a solution. And yet we depend on the body. And that's how we get addicted to things. Because now we've chosen alcohol or self-harm or whatever it is, or gambling or porn or food to fulfill a void. And stress over here is saying, I'm telling you how to fix it. But because I do not want to ask my parents for money, because my core belief is I am dumb or something like that, right? That will prevent me from asking them money. And therefore, if I ask them for money, I feel like I'm not good enough. And you know what? I don't want to go there right now. I'm going to use my coping skill, my unhealthy coping skill, to avoid fixing the issue. So when it comes down to healthy coping skills, I think it has to do more with how we process things, the ability to understand our brain and to understand that I have 5 seconds or less to make that decision before my brain protects me from actually not doing it. Like if you don't even know that's how much time you have, and you're like, well, should I go to the gym? Should I not go to the gym? If I sit on it for 5 seconds, then my brain says, okay, let's protect them from not going to the gym. But if I'm able to switch that thought and say, no, Mo, we say we're going to go to the gym, then my brain floods me with all kinds of thoughts. No, Mo, we say we're going to do this. We're going to become better because of this. We're going to be healthy because of this. Then it helps me. That's an internal resource that is not, I cannot utilize that.
Right.
So the idea is I have to be able to help clients process for themselves to reach that without needing something. I mean, that's the worst thing we can do. Like, we're almost teaching them how to become codependent on something external. No, let's not go that far if not needed. Let's first help you educate the brain so you're able to then, if needed, yes, you go grab that.
Very, very interesting. Very interesting. I feel like I have a lot of different, I would say a lot of different perspectives. Obviously, I'm not a therapist, but just, within the world, within seeing things, within, being somebody that I 1,000% agree you have to start on the inside and work your way out. That is hands down, it's a lot of work, and it's a lot of things that you do have to continue, and habits and healthy habits. And it's just interesting hearing, what you've seen, what you've heard, what you've dealt with,
And I would say I make a lot of people angry initially. Their brain protects them. No, don't listen to this, because if we do listen, that means we're going to have to do something different. And a lot of people that have made so mad, when they come back, they thank me.
Yep.
And that's when that little thing keeps me going, because I always tell my fiance, I'm not scared of getting fired for doing the right thing. I'm not.
Right.
Because this is what I truly believe that is going to be able to help just more than one person. Because if I can help you develop that, you will develop relationships around that.
Mm-hmm.
And therefore, I've eliminated an issue. And yet I've created a solution for you to impact others. Because we humans, we long for connection.
Yeah.
And if I can help you connect with others, that's kind of what it is. Like, if I can help everybody just connect, that's kind of the goal.
Well, and that's, the phrase, it takes a village to raise a kid. I mean, it takes a village to raise all of us.
Absolutely.
I mean, really, like, I have my own little village that, I have brought in around me, that I'm like, okay, if I need this is my person. If I need this is my person. And that's all connecting. That's all, so many different ways, because we can't do it all, and I think that is where people really struggle, is that they're like, I have to do this myself.
Right.
And I'll tell you, I'm pretty dang stubborn when it's like, nope, I got it. I can do it. Nope, don't help me. I'm fine.
Yeah.
But I also have recognized where my threshold is. I'm like, no, I need them to help me. Hey, I'm not scared to reach out to you and say, hey, can you help me on this? Like, I don't know what I'm doing. One reason why I came to this studio was because I did attempt to, start the podcast by myself. And I was like, nope, I am not a tech person. This is not me.
Right. Absolutely.
And you find a different, resource for that. With all of this, I mean, it's just a great, awareness to bring you on to the podcast, to have a different perspective. Any of the listeners, I would also say, this is also maybe why it does take a couple people to go through, because your style is different than a different person's.
Absolutely. That
connection, even though that you are needing that help with you, it may not be the right fit.
Correct.
You're getting connected, but it's the wrong puzzle piece.
Absolutely.
And to the listeners, I would say continue. Yes, it is going to take you a couple people to go to counseling or to go to therapy and figure out what style works for you, what you need to be taught or educated on within you, with all of it. Mo, we didn't even talk about your podcast.
I'm good at that. It's all good. It's all good. We're here. We're here, and it's the first podcast I'm ever in. Right?
Yeah.
This is exciting. Not sure what was gonna come out, but good energy. I'm all about energy. Listen to your energy. Energy will guide you to the right place.
Yeah.
And if you don't understand energy, the flow of energy, then that's also where you can hone in and start. Because if you don't know who to trust energy.
Yeah.
That's the one thing you can actually depend in life. So
Yeah. All right. Well, we wrap up. Do you have any parting thoughts or kind of teachings to the guests and the followers? And then also tell us how we can find you.
Yeah, I think I've said kind of what I've needed to say today. There's a lot of things. I can talk for days and days and days and days. Open-minded. Boise, be open-minded. Be open-minded to different styles. Whatever doesn't fit, just throw it away. Visualize yourself. Oh, I don't like that. Don't pour the energy into writing a comment about, no, this guy, whatever. No, take what was good and build on it. Because as humans, we need that connection. And a lot of people, like I said, I've made so many people upset. But I think the biggest people that have made an impact on are the people that have made the most upset.
Yeah.
Ironically.
Yeah.
So, yeah, you can email me. I love going out to coffee and meeting new people. So if you want to reach out to me or talk to me about resources, I only refer to a couple of therapists because I'm not going to send you to somebody who I don't know. You can reach out Esperilla, ESPERILLA @nnu.edu. Email me. I'll go to coffee. We'll go to coffee. Challenge me. I always say people, do not challenge people without understanding what you're challenging me on. Don't say, nope, I don't believe him. If you don't believe me, go study and prove me wrong so I don't keep doing it.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely.
yeah.
And even though we didn't talk about it, how can they find your podcast?
Not everyone gets a trophy.com, and we're on all platforms. Again, we've joined SB Studios just to be part of a bigger family of podcasters. And thank you so much. I reached out to you first, and thank you. I didn't know it was going to happen, but I appreciate it.
Absolutely.
So.
Absolutely. Well, thank you, listeners, for yet another week of Raw Thoughts Podcast. Like I mentioned in the beginning, I would absolutely love if you could head over to Apple Podcast and give me a review. If you take a screenshot of that and you share it on your social media, I'll do something for you. I don't know. I just thought of that, but here it is.
Yeah. And if it's okay with you, I'll probably put this on the audio on our podcast, if that's okay with you. So little collaboration there.
That's super fun. Well, thank you, guests, and I will see you next Wednesday. Have a good day. Thank you for tuning into the show today. Your feedback is very important to me. If you could leave a review, as well as follow me on Instagram at rawthoughts.podcast and email in at m.rawthoughts@gmail.com if you have any guest suggestions.